Lifestyle
with Allan T.
My next guest is Carmen Dörwald. That's how it's supposed to be pronounced, she just told me. It's called Navigating Survival. It's redefining cancer and breaking borders. Now, she was born and raised as a third culture kid in China, England and Germany. My goodness. Carmen led a vibrant life, thriving in her career as a tech recruiter, traveling, enjoying CrossFit and recording YouTube covers. Busy lady. Shortly after her 25th birthday, she would take a devastating turn in August of 2020 when she was diagnosed with diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. After 5 persistent doctor visits, by then the aggressive cancer had already advanced to stage 3. Despite responding well to initial intensive chemotherapy, her remission was heartbreakingly brief as the cancer relapsed, leading to a more daunting prognosis. Well, this harrowing journey unfolded amid, of course, the global COVID-19 pandemic and further complicating an already overwhelming situation. Well, against the odds, Carmen achieved a complete remission in September of 2021. Welcome on the program, Carmen.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, as I say, all this was taking place at a terrible, terrible time in the world, of course, with the pandemic at its height. And tell us a little bit about your feelings when it all started, and how you must have reacted when you were told that you were beginning to overcome this incredible, this horrific and incredibly complicated condition.
Wow. Honestly, that is a very good question, because it just literally takes me back to the time when all of this started, because at that point in my life, I was really in a very transitional period for so many reasons. I was working, in recruitment at a startup company, and we were also in the process of being kind of transferred to another company. So there was multiple things going on.
Wow.
At the same time, we also had some personal things going on. One of my dogs who I grew up with, she wasn't feeling so well. So I was also traveling back to say my last goodbyes. She was one of my best friends. So that was one of the first things that really kind of one of the worst things that started to happen back in 2020. But at the same time, I was also really stressed in my job because we were in the process of being transferred and there was a lot of uncertainty. But as a result of that, which I also read in the book, which I also wrote in the book, there were some layoffs that happened. And then during that time, a few weeks before that happened, I started to experience very strange symptoms that were very unusual. So it was really trying to navigate a couple of things at once with a job, looking for a new job, trying to figure out what was going on in my body, visiting multiple doctors. But long story short, thankfully, I found a new job. But then 2 weeks later, I was told that I was diagnosed with this aggressive cancer. So I was forced on sick leave for the next year and a half. And at that point, I didn't really have the time to really, I guess I was in a little bit of a denial because I was this couldn't be happening because I lived a very healthy lifestyle. Yeah. But I guess I was so focused on being in survival mode that at that point in time, I felt really numb. I was in so much a state of shock that I was really numb. But the feelings of the grief, the sadness only came much later. But at that point, I was just so focused on trying to, balance everything, keep all the balls in the air.
When you were diagnosed with the lymphoma, and obviously you sound to me as an extremely sort of busy and very active individual at the age of 26 to sort of suddenly discover that. Did you feel at any time that your life was over in terms of your future career and so on, or did you think, I'm going to fight this?
Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting question. I would say at first I did feel really hopeful. My first shock was I was really angry. I was like, why did this happen to me? But the doctors did tell me that the prognosis is really good, that even though it's a very aggressive type of lymphoma, it would respond well. So at the beginning, I felt very hopeful. I felt extremely motivated. I had an amazing support system of people who were cheering me on, motivating me. So that kept me going. And I was told to undergo 6 cycles of chemotherapy. And I felt like, I was responding well to the treatment. But then things sort of took a little turn in December 2020, when I found out a few weeks after I was in remission that my cancer came back. And at that point, there was a shift in my mindset where I was just like, I felt really discouraged. It was really heartbreaking that I just didn't have the willpower in me to continue to push on. I just did not have the will to go on.
You kind of, well, I suppose you went into a sort of a depression, and because you thought, okay, it's back, I'm not going to beat this. But did you sort of keep saying to yourself, I'm going to do what I can to try and beat this. I'm going to really, really sort of do as much as I can? Because you sound to me as though a very go-getter. You sound as though somebody who won't give up.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, though, what was interesting was that because of the nature of my cancer, I didn't really have much of a choice, because as soon as the doctors told me your cancer came back, they already were like, yeah, you're going to be admitted in the hospital the next day. You're going to go through this chemo. So I didn't exactly have like much of a choice. I think for some chemo patients or cancer patients, they're given a couple of options. But for me, the doctor's like, you're going to the hospital, you're doing this, you're doing that. So I think at that point, my mind just sort of went into autopilot mode. As much as I was really, I felt really down, really discouraged, really angry and upset. But what kept me going throughout the end was the love and support from the community, which I've gotten.
That is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes such a big, big difference.
Your memoir is a candid and compelling account of your cancer journey, and designed to support and inspire others facing similar challenges. Now, blending your personal narrative with practical advice for survivors and caregivers, your story is set against the backdrop of the pandemic, which, of course, is a double sort of thing to deal with. I mean, and did you feel as though, because obviously you might have been in hospital and you must have seen things going on around you, which I don't suppose a lot of us would actually have seen before the pandemic hit? Did that help you to think, right, there's a lot of people here are in really, really bad way? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I think what people don't fail to realize, or not fail to realize, perhaps poor choice of wording, but a lot of the times when I was talking to some people, they were saying, well, first, I just want to emphasize that there is never a good time to get cancer. Cancer is horrible. It's one of the things I don't wish on anyone at all.
No.
But I will say, though, a lot of people assume that, because everyone is pretty much on hold with their life with the pandemic, I'm not missing out on anything. But what I am missing out is the fact that when I was in the hospital, they placed very strict restrictions, because I was in the hospital at a time when the vaccines haven't been discovered. No. They were not introduced. So there was a lot of restrictions to the point that visitors weren't allowed. So for me, it was extremely isolating. And I had to do everything on my own. I couldn't hold my parents' hand. I couldn't have my friends visit me. And at some point at my treatment, I was in an isolated room for 3 weeks because of the stem cell transplant. So for me, mentally speaking, it was a different set of challenges as well than it would if the pandemic didn't exist.
Well, you kind of asked my next question about the conditions that you had to exist under with no sort of approach and no contact with your friends and family, because you give the impression that your support system was very important to you when you were first diagnosed, and the pandemic kind of took that away from you, and you must have had and did you start to think about, I'm going to write about this and let people, when did it actually come to you to say, I'm going to write this book, I'm going to let people know? And obviously, when the memoir, you conclude a hopeful note, it also bravely addresses the lingering trauma and offers valuable insights, as it says here. Do you find yourselves in similar situations? Yes?
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting story of how the book came to life, because initially, I was trying to debate, okay, should I kind of open my diagnosis, my journey to the world? My community, my social network, the people are scattered across the globe. So most of my friendships, relationships, family, it's all virtual, long distance friendships and relationships. And so I like to kind of share my updates there, on social media. Yeah. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do that just yet, but I've realized that, I do need the support. I do need, it is nice to have a sense of community so that I feel less alone. So what happened was I started to share some of my updates, about every single chemo round. I started to share updates about, my journey, my diagnosis, my reflections. And then one of the people commented on my post and said, Carmen, have you thought of starting a blog? And I was like, okay, why not? Everyone writes a blog. So at first, when I wrote the blog, I wanted to use it as an outlet to sort of give it a safe space for me to process my thoughts and emotions. So, sure. I started to share a lot of content on my blog. And eventually, I do have to give a special credit to, good to see you, to my dear friend, mentor, family friend, Peter Humphrey. And he took a look at the blog and he's like, this is very good content for a book material. And I was a bit skeptical. I had some reservations at first because I was like, why would I write a book? Everyone's written a book before. But I kind of made a promise to myself that if I reach remission, I want to use the second chance of my life to be able to say yes to opportunities and do things, even when I feel a little bit scared, even when I have some doubts. So basically, the different elements and the pieces of my blog, it kind of transformed into a book.
It started to sort of look as though there's a book in this.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of just put the pieces of puzzle together, tried to fill in the gaps, turn it into a story. But again, as I mentioned in the book, it's more than just a bloggy style. It's more than just a story. It is in a sense. And when people read this book, some of the stuff that I've written was really during the time when I was going through treatment. So the tone is really, really vulnerable. It's really, really raw. And I tend to keep it that way because I want to keep it as real and authentic as possible. I want to challenge the society of their perception of survivorship, trauma, cancer, often glamorized as well on social media, in the movies. And I really want to demonstrate and illustrate the reality as well. And then in some parts of the books, they would also have sections of practical advice, scientific reference. So it's something that every reader can benefit from.
It sounds to me as though you've really sort of gone into the writing thing and in a big way, because you're basically sort of telling us an awful lot about what kind of goes on behind the scenes in these situations. Yes?
Correct.
Now, when you obviously were in hospital and we say you didn't have contact with friends and family, were you able to use technology? Did you have a Zoom? Did you have an access through Skype and things like that? Did that help? Did that help?
Absolutely. Oh, thank goodness for technology. Yeah. I mean, God bless technology as well. That's what really kept me sane. And I mean, even before I was hospitalized, most of my interactions were virtual, but thankfully I did have my mom, my dad by my side. But when I was in the isolation ward,
virtually, you had them virtually,
mom, all taken away. So it did make a huge difference having to speak with my friends, having regular calls. And what was really interesting was that I kept myself very busy at the hospital. Pretty much almost every day I had a call with a different friend. And it helped a lot because even though they can't actively change the situation, it shifted my mind and it helped me forget about the fact that I'm
You had a distraction. You had a distraction and it helped.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also a nice reminder that, behind every cancer patient, we're more than just a cancer patient. We had a life before. We have, aspirations, values, dreams, and interests. So I think that was definitely very important for the mental aspect of going through cancer as well.
Wow. We said here that you're basically a third culture kid in China, England, and Germany. So you're sort of much traveled as well. And are you settled now in the UK, or are you living in Germany?
Well, currently speaking, I'm actually in Bulgaria. I'm actually doing some.
So you're moving around a lot. Yes,
I am. I'm currently just traveling around, visiting some friends and family.
So
as of now, I am based in Germany. Yeah.
So what is going to be your next project? Are you going to do more writing, do you think, now you've got the bug?
I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but I'm definitely taking it as it comes. Currently speaking, I am in between jobs, because I wanted to kind of take a break, take a step back to figure out, what is important to me. But I guess I would just continue picking up the projects that I left off. I still have my blog up and running. I do have a podcast as well. It's called How Did You Find Out, which basically centers around a space where every episode features a story of a young chronic illness survivor. I say young chronic illness survivor because it goes beyond just cancer survivors. And basically, the stories are there to challenge that chronic illnesses or diseases, they don't discriminate. They don't care about age. And I really want to challenge and push the stigmas and thinking patterns around that, because one of the reasons why I got started on that podcast is because I've been hearing so many similar stories where my friends or peers or people that I know of, they've been experiencing symptoms only to be dismissed by the healthcare system. And by the time they found out, it was already too late.
Well, you said the number of times you had to sort of contact the doctors to sort of to get diagnosed.
I visited 5 different doctors as well. And if only we discovered it sooner, we would have better options. And that's why I keep emphasizing that early detection does save lives as well.
Fantastic. So how did you find out? That's the podcast title.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, we're obviously going to mention that again later in the show. Thank you very much. I cannot say it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Carmen, and I wish you good health and lots of success. And I do hope that you'll get a good response from this book. And I do think you're also going to be doing other interviews as well, and I think you're going to find a lot of interest in what you've managed. What you've actually been very brave. You've been very courageous. You show that it can be done, and it's important that we retain that and we keep that in our thinking, especially when you've been through so much. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you. And I actually did switch the camera on, and you put your camera on because I just thought I've got to see how this girl reacts to everything. And you've got a big smile on your face, and you're cheerful. You've been through so much when you come through it, and I think you're going to have a tremendous successful career in whatever you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And just remind our listeners again, it's called Navigating Survival. It's Redefining Cancer and Breaking Borders. And it's available now through the normal book sites. And of course, you can go straight to TRE Talk Radio and you can find the book Navigating Survival, Redefining Cancer and Breaking Borders. And it's written by Carmen, and it's actually about Carmen, and it's Dörwald, or you would read it as Dorwald. But she told me how to pronounce it correctly, so I thought I would. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your time, and lots of success to you in the future.
So much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as well.